Welcome everybody to In the Art Scene. My name is Galina Marcus. I'm with Sue Britt today, and this artist is going to blow your mind just like she blew mine. Sue, hi. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
I was so stoked when I first saw your work, and I was able to handle it. I mean, I was in the very close proximity, and I still couldn't figure out how you did it. And I hope that we will get to your whole process, and then you can give away as much as you want, because no one wants to give away all the secrets. But I just wanted to start with like very, very beginning. Um, did you play with paper when you were a kid? Were you creative?
I was super creative when I was a kid. I was really lucky because my mom recognized that I liked it. And so she provided me with every material under the sun. But paper wasn't a big deal for me. I was a painter. I loved to paint. I was using oils when I was very young. I grew up in Milwaukee, and I would take a 45-minute bus ride down to the art museum and take watercolor lessons. And I just loved it. I love painting all the time. And luckily we had a basement and it could get really messy. And so that's where it all started. So.
I know. I work in the garage, and I'm so happy that I don't have to worry about the floors and everything.
Yeah, that's exactly where my studio is too. You know, I started here because I had kids and there was no space in the house. My kids are all gone, but I've recently made the decision, it's okay. I like my garage. I like it here.
Exactly. All right. So you're an artsy kid. And did you go and get your BFA, MFA? How did that go about?
Oh no BFA, no MFA for me. I loved art, and I practiced it all the way through high school and loved drawing and did a ton of painting. And it came to deciding what I was going to do next. And I played with the idea of art school, but I had a dad who was very much on the side of art school. Where is that going to take you? And luckily, I was also really good at math and science, and I loved math and science. And I had a counselor who maybe didn't know what he was doing, but he certainly pointed me in a really good direction. He said, art plus math and science equals architecture. Have you thought about architecture? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I have. And that was kind of in the beginning of my senior year. And I had this communications class that I was taking. It was an advanced class, and I did a senior thesis on the how architecture communicates. And it sold me. And I said, this is perfect for me. I have the arts, I like art and science, and I love this whole idea of it being cultural communication. And so I studied architecture, which was, to me, one of the best educations ever, because it taught me about problem solving. It taught me how to use drawing as a thinking medium, as a communication medium. I don't know. I just and the idea that it was three-dimensional too, right? So it was dimensional, and it had to do with people. I was out in the world thinking about how people move through the world and think about the world. So it was great. I love the education.
All right. I got to ask you that question. How does the architect communicate?
Oh, how does architecture communicate? Well, so think about the variety of spaces that you are in your daily life. And when you walk into a small, intimate space, maybe it's a little place to buy a cup of tea, you immediately feel at home because it is small and unintimidating. And you feel like you can tuck yourself into a table and be just safe and fine. Or you walk into the courthouse downtown with its soaring atrium, and you're kind of overwhelmed, and you say, oh, this is a little bit about respect and awe and seriousness, hard materials. Like there's serious work that goes on here. And so architecture in those ways, and each culture is really different, develops signals that people understand as they walk into spaces, what they should be doing there, what they shouldn't be doing there, what is possible there. And so there are clues about size and volume and different kinds of materials and how people are interacting in that space that give clues to how we move about the world.
That's fascinating because I think intuitively I kind of knew that, but I never
Mm-hmm.
thought about it this way. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. And,
Yeah.
and you have worked as an architect after you got your degree, right?
I did. I worked for about 6 years, got my architectural license, and then I had this great idea that my husband and I should join the Peace Corps. So I left and went into the Peace Corps and used my skills there to help with building materials and building practices in Honduras.
In Honduras.
Yeah, in Honduras.
Nice.
So
how long have you been there?
we were there for 2 years, and it was great. It was full of water projects and introducing concrete roof tiles as a new building material and solar energy introduction and all kinds of great stuff.
That's great. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, you're a much deeper person than I even expected.
Well, I've had a lot of different things that I've done through my life. I read a book early on in life, and it was a book that inspired me. It was called Composing a Life. And it is a book that says life doesn't have to be a straight line. It can be really crooked. And all those things can add to each other and build up to a pretty interesting life. And I kind of took that to heart. So,
okay. What other adventures did you have?
well, maybe not adventures, but different things. After I came back from the Peace Corps, I decided not to go back to architecture and decided that I would continue nonprofit work. And so I started working with a microloan program that did training and microloans for entrepreneurs. And so I learned all about small business and loans. Yeah. And then I stayed home with kids because my husband took a job where he traveled a lot. And so I decided, okay, I'll stay home with kids for a while. And then because I was doing so much teaching, I started teaching a written and illustrated class before school and some science programs at noon in my kids' school. I said, I really like this teaching thing. Maybe I'll go back to school. And I did. And I started teaching K through 6. And then I decided, not for me. Maybe I should really go back and do that art thing that I always wanted to do. So that's how I ended up in art.
Okay, so that was a full circle for about how long? I mean, you a high school, then you decided to go get your education, and it wasn't an art education, and then your kids are at school, and they were what, middle school, high school at that point when you decided?
Grade school, middle school. I was doing a lot of that, yeah. And then the teaching. My youngest was in grade school too when I was doing teaching, and then I said, time to stop. And so I've been now teaching or doing art since, I think it was, I don't know, about 2012 when I probably said, oh, this is enough. I can do this. I can sell. I can join an organization, start thinking that I can put my work out in the world. So it was probably about 5 years before that I was really working on my new art and coming up with a new technique and thinking about what I wanted to put out in the world.
All right. So when you decided that you are officially becoming a full-time artist, you have already been doing your paper tapestries, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about the paper tapestries because when you said that you were an architect, I immediately thought, well, that makes sense because your paper tapestries they're like mosaic and they're very much three-dimensional. And,
Mhm.
and like at first I really thought that they were tapestries, but there are no seams, there are no stitches or anything like that. So, and it really takes, in my imagination, it really takes a very precise mathematical mind to construct the amazing, great outdoor scenery out of little three-dimensional pieces stuck together. And the way you're working with color, and I got to ask you about how you come up with all those colors, and how do you like color all your paper, do you dye all your paper? So and I will put the photos in the adjacent blog post so everybody can see what I'm talking about, because unfortunately the podcast, we can only describe uh, to the extent of the vocabulary, and English is my second language. So I don't have much
Okay.
vocabulary to describe
No, you're doing great. It's really interesting because the name paper tapestry, my work has changed. And I think that's true of any artist that's practiced, for over 10 years. Is like when I first started this paper tapestry, the reason why the word tapestry was there is because it was woven. You do
that.
not see weaving in my work today, but when I started, the idea came to me of doing layers and weaving layers of paper together, so that as you wove strips of paper that were curvilinear and unusual shapes, you would discover new shapes in the weaving. And I found that really fascinating. And I have to say that I'm going to back up just a little bit because this technique came totally out of play. I was not planning on finding a new technique. I was not excited about even doing wall art at that time. I was doing dimensional work. I was doing boxes that told stories and um, different kinds of three-dimensional work. But I was working with paper, and I had a group of friends, and we were doing creative exercises with each other. And the one that spurred this idea was putting two opposite ideas together. And it caused me to weave two flat paper collages together. I cut them up and wove them together. And I loved the result. And it was just play. I didn't think, oh, yeah, I'm going to invent something new today or whatever. And it just caused me to think about texture and this weaving and landscape. And I said, I really love landscape. I like hiking a lot. I, like all this. And, that thing that you talked about, like the fitting and the, a technical part of it, it's very fitting for me as an architect, right? I say that all the time when I tell people, oh, yeah, I was an architect once. And they're like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand. It's like, yeah, there is that piece that I like, that technical nature of it. And I don't think it's that hard, but it's very precise. And there's something that I really like about that.
It is really precise. It's like a perfect mosaic.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
not so
probably.
perfect. Not so perfect, though. I fool everybody with that. So, so I don't know if your listeners want to know what the technique is, but so what I do now, and I don't weave so much, but I layer, is a design is cut out of foam board, and it can be different thicknesses of foam board. And I just use a mat knife, and then I cut those pieces, and then sometimes I carve them. So carving off edges to give little indents into the whole picture. And then each one of those pieces, I glue paper to and wrap it around the backside. And so each one of those little pieces becomes, like you said, a mosaic piece that then fits back together. But anybody who has a little bit of engineering mind understands immediately, oh, you are wrapping that piece with paper. That means it's thicker and bigger than it should be when it fits back together. And that's a little bit of the technical issue. That's why I say they are not always perfect mosaics. I am pushing and shoving and adding and subtracting to get them to go back together.
Paper is somewhat forgiving, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
like, trying to shove two pieces of marble together that don't fit, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would never want to do that.
I gotta ask you though, do you have pictures of your older work where you were weaving paper?
I
Because
do. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
really love to put it in a blog post as well.
Yeah. I have some pieces on my website. I can, send you them to include.
That
Yeah.
that would be awesome. That would be
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So where do you get all your inspirations? You mentioned that you're hiking a lot. And I
I am.
know I asked you that before once when you came to the print shop that you are not using reference photos.
No.
And that's something that also blew my mind. It's like how there's so many different things you gotta process in your mind. And it's all like without even references and without blueprints or anything. So please tell us how you do that.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes when I think about it, I think, oh, all those road trips back when I was a little kid, just driving in the car, looking outside, remembering what the landscape was like. We couldn't take pictures of everything. It was expensive. Not everybody had a camera in their pocket. And so if you wanted to remember something, you had to say to yourself, this is what it looked like, you know? And so sometimes I think, well, I grew up trying to remember places, for one. And then like now, I come back and I sketch. I think about what I saw, and usually it's not like I'm trying to capture everything in the hike. It is what struck me when I was out hiking. Was there a view? Was there an idea that passed through my head that was related to the landscape that made me think of something interesting? What was that? And that's what I'm trying to capture. So it's not like I'm trying to capture the exact copy of what I saw. It is this idea, what I was thinking about. Maybe it's a series of events that happened during the hike, and so that's more in my head. That's more like narrative, or um sometimes it's something that I read that clicks, and I say, oh yeah, that's what this guy was talking about, or this is an idea I want to pursue as a visual um metaphor or something. And yeah, and so then I go and I sketch. I start with just tiny little one by one sketches and start playing with, how do I express this? How do I think about this?
All right. So there is somewhat a blueprint.
Yes, there is. I
Okay.
don't just go and start carving.
I
No, I don't.
Yeah,
No.
well, the first time when you said that you just work from your head, that's what I thought. That you just
Ah,
get to board and start immediately carving the foam board and
no. No. So this gets, I think, back to like that architectural education, right? I mean, you have an idea, but you're working at the idea. You're throwing out a bunch of ideas. How can I express this? How does this work? What composition does this the best? What size piece? All those kind of things, like an architect would do, starting a design, right? Like, I have this idea. What's the best way to bring it into the world? And so that's what I do. Yeah. Yeah.
and another technical question is about the paper.
Uh huh.
Do you make your paper? Do you dye your own paper? What kind of paper is it? Is it a tissue paper? It looks like tissue paper.
Nope. Nope. It's not tissue paper. And I don't do a lot of coloring of my paper. I do a little bit, but most of my paper comes from art stores. A lot of art stores will import it. And most of it is a paper called Lacta paper. Lacta is the fiber that it's made out of, and it comes from Southeast Asia. So, like Nepal is a really big exporter of it. And it's quite, about 2 years ago, I did this research because I said, I should know more about the paper that I use in my work. And it turned out to be this really great story. Back in this, so it's a traditional paper that they've been making for 900 years there out of a lacta bush. It's a bush that matures every 5 to 7 years. They cut it back and it regrows. So it's sustainable. And they've been making it for a long time. And then in the 60s, China started manufacturing paper and flooding the market with cheap paper, and they were losing their market share. And UNESCO realized that this was a business that kept the economy in small villages outside of Kathmandu viable. And so they came in and said, what can we do to make this a viable international business? And they helped develop a market for gift paper and these decorative papers that I use now. And so it's stayed a very viable business for them. And I just love that story because it really ties in for me with my Peace Corps experience and really doing, developing economic possibilities for small communities outside of, big cities. And so I really like that. And I love telling the story about locked up paper, and I love that I'm using it. So,
it's a beautiful story.
yeah.
And I'll make sure to put the references in the blog post again if people want to learn a little bit more about the community and how people make that paper. That'll be all in the blog post. So
okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Let's take a short coffee break. This podcast is the passion project that I produce and finance myself. If you want to support the show, you are welcome to volunteer, but the easier way is to just buy me a coffee. There's a link for it in the show notes and on our website, intheartscene.com. Thank you for your support.
Every once in a while, like there's a couple papers that I will do some coloring with. That I just really love. They are a different kind of paper. It has some resist, so I use some watercolor on it. But other than that, I have just huge collections. I just have really big collections of paper, and that's what I use.
You have probably boxes and boxes of it.
Yeah, big stacks.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's fascinating. It's so educational. Honestly.
Well, it's interesting, the thing of, for me, I always come to this, people ask me about the paper, right? You use paper. Why is that? And I have to say, like, my use of paper started with bookbinding, doing artist books. And I think the moment that I used a nice glue and good paper and mounted it to a board, like it had magic for me. And I always ask other artists, like, what was the magic moment for you? How did you choose your medium? Right? Because I think we have, as artists, just connections to our medium, whether it's like how the paint feels when it goes across a canvas or a board, or like there's a there's something tactile about it, as well as a look and smell and feel and kind of all that stuff. And for some reason, paper suits me. I don't know why.
Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. About the tactile sensories. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. At some point I was playing with soft pastels, and the best thing for me was to crush it with a very fine blade and then rub it with my fingers. And it was just so, like ASMR thing, like micro sensories.
Uh-huh.
It was so beautiful. Wow. Yeah. And I just had a question in my mind that I wanted to ask. The bookbinding, you mentioned the bookbinding.
Yeah.
So you did bookbinding.
They're creative art books. It was one of the things that kept my creativity alive when I was home with kids. I did birthday books for my kids that took a theme from the year and did a unusual type book for my kids every year. One year it was each page was part of a huge living room sized crossword puzzle, or it could be a book of maps, or it could be a book of tower, just whatever made sense for the kid that year. And so I learned bookbinding to give me a bigger palette of possibilities when I made those books.
Once an artist, always an artist.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing of like, I couldn't say that I could just go out to my studio and spend time there. I had three kids and I was working pretty hard to be with them, but to do something for them and for me at the same time, I would stay up to midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning to do that. And it kept that creative spirit alive. And, in the end, really has gave me the beginning of this career that I really love. So
Yeah, introduced you to paper and glue.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What you said just really resonated with me because I have very warm memories about my own mother
Mm,
who worked in printing and book production for she graduated with this degree, and
uh-huh.
uh, when she was in school, she thought that she wants to be a librarian because she just loved working with books, and she ended up in printing and publishing. And I remember when I was in first grade, we had in the school, our school had like a library of, textbooks, and
Uh-huh.
they were all so old and they were falling apart. You were not um, supposed to buy your own books. And that was my first grade was Soviet Russia. You're not supposed to buy your own books, and there was no way to buy your own books. You get them at the library. You're supposed to take a good care of them, but whoever that was before me didn't. So what my
Uh-huh.
mom did, she took them all apart, created a new backing for the books, decorated it, and
Oh,
at the end of the year, when I was returning them to the library, I uh, I almost got in trouble because they did not look exactly the same as the rest of the books.
uh-huh. But that
But
was your book. Oh,
yeah, and it actually made me feel really good that whoever kid who's going to use those books after me will get them not only nicely put together that they're not falling apart anymore, but they will be unique because they don't look like all the rest of them, at least,
yeah.
from the cover side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
really
that's really
cool.
cool. I love that story.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually very interesting how when I get to talk to other artists on this podcast, like something they say actually brings me back to some episodes of my own life that I have I never thought that they would contribute to me and my identity as an artist today. And
Mm,
it's to the point to what you said at the very, very beginning. We are a collection of the experiences and knowledges that we have throughout our lives, and it results in what we do today.
yeah. Yeah.
What we do
Yeah,
today
it's
will
a
result in something we do tomorrow.
yeah. I worked in Spanish Village for a long time, and it was one of my joys was when artists would come in, right? So we as artists also want to go out and be inspired, right? So artists would
Yeah.
come to Spanish Village in Balboa Park and kind of poke around, and you knew from the way they talked about art or asked questions, you knew right away, okay, this is an artist who's just walked into my space. And it was such a joy to share that piece of, this common desire, but hearing the unique take on it every time, right? And just being in that moment um of almost like communion, right? You're communing over art, and I just love that. It's one of the great reasons to make art, because, like, as an artist, I feel like anybody who comes in and talks about my work or even purchases my work, it's like we are bonding over this piece of art in some way, right? Just sharing a common place that we hiked or a place we've been or just the love of the day or the color or whatever. We're just sharing something in that moment. And it is really a human and heartwarming thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely love sharing um, with artists, something that I know and love about art. And I love how open all the artists who are coming to our podcast are. That
mm,
makes me think every single time that there is no competition in art. because I have met a couple of people who say, yeah, well, I will probably not reveal some of the things. And I get it, and it's totally fine to do that. But if you think about it, if you inspire someone, they will take it. And just like you said, they will put their own spin on it, right?
Mhm.
Because there for the artist, it's really not interesting to make something exactly like someone else does, right?
That's
You
right.
want to make it your own, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's really true. It's one of those things where people have asked me to teach this technique, and when I was in Spanish Village, I would show people all the time. It's really not that hard of a technique, and I always say it's the finding of what you want to say that is the harder thing. And so I would love to talk about that. That would be exciting, right? But teaching a technique, oh, we can do that in 5 minutes. Let's move on to the more interesting thing. What's inside of you? What do you want to say? What is it you want to tell the world? That's what I think is cool.
Are you still teaching?
No, I am not. I did not teach for very long. I taught for about 3 years, and I said, you know what? It just was not for me. I enjoy watching kids' minds move and change, but there are many other things that go on in the classroom that were not as exciting for me. And so I said, nope, I practice art full time, and
Oh,
that is
how about adults? Do you give workshops?
oh, workshops. I do not. I have not done workshops before. I am in the midst of change, though. So that
Okay.
might be something that's in my future. I actually just recently stopped out of my studio in Spanish Village
Mm-hmm.
to work on a year-long project that I'm super excited about. That's based on hiking the Coast to Crest Trail, which is just a 90-mile trail. And I'm doing art about it, I'm writing about it, and hopefully I'm going to put this out there because I think I might put a book together about it. And I just wanted to work on that. I didn't want to think about selling art or anything else. I just wanted to work on that project. So, and I wanted to change gears a little bit. So maybe there will be some teaching in there. I don't know yet. I just wanted to change gears. It was time for a change.
Well, that sounds exciting. So
Yeah.
you are actually going on a 90-mile hike.
So the hike that I'm talking about, it's a group of segments. And so it goes from the Del Mar estuary at San Diego and then goes up to Mount Vulcan and Julian. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not 90 miles all at once. It's all kinds of segments. They're as short as a mile. And I think the longest contiguous part is maybe 22 miles, but I don't hike 22 miles at once. But so I'm hiking all these segments. Usually they're about 6 miles. And my goal is to make art about them in many different seasons throughout the year and just become really familiar with them and see what a lot of familiarity does to the art. Because I often do art about places I visit, and maybe I'm there for just a day, but here I'm going to do art about places that I'm getting to know really well. And I'm hiking in them a lot, multiple times a week, multiple times a month, and to see what happens with that familiarity and how it affects the art. So I'm just curious.
That's
So I
that's
decided to
that's
move
really
in.
interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's something that I think also not a lot of people pay a lot of attention to, especially here in San Diego. Like
Mhm.
honestly, when I moved to San Diego, the first year kind of went it was very strange because I never noticed the season change.
Ah.
And I came from Moscow, and you understand
Uh-huh.
like the change of seasons there and the change of seasons here. Now I kind of get when like, oh, it's a little chilly. It's, we have some rain in the winter, and or I get the no. I noticed that I'm fascinated with plants, so I kind of notice what plants bloom at what time of year. So to me, that's an indication. But the first year was really like blank, like I stuck in time completely.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, would be really interesting to see your take on the familiar places and how they change throughout the year.
Yeah.
It will be
Yeah.
really interesting.
And then there's this other interesting part of it because they're not all new trails to me. Some of them I've been hiking for a really long time. And so I will hike those and I'll realize this is a drought year, right? And I'll be mourning, the missing wildflowers or the missing water in the waterbed. And just thinking about how that context affects the art too. And I just think it's interesting to take time to just really um, watch your brain think about it, and how you're developing these, and in this idea of really creating a unique expression of that. Just getting to know myself and how I think about these places. That's where that's going to come from. It's not going to come from anywhere else, right? I need to do that for myself, and so I'm taking a little bit of time to do that.
That would be really cool. And I love that your art is environmental, not only in a representational way, in the way that you use paper, what kind of paper, and yeah, and the things that you are putting out with your art.
Yeah.
That's
I'm really excited because the park that oversees like this Coast to Crest Trail, they're doing a group of hikes in the fall that
oh,
are really teaching about the flora and the fauna and the geology of the place. And I'm going to take those, and I'm going to meet all these other people who are equally just fascinated by this, love this place. And then I think, oh my gosh, they're going to add to the story because they're going to see this place different than I do. They'll see things that I don't see, and that will add into the mix too. So yeah, and so it is a bit wrapped up in that whole idea that I so appreciate that this group has preserved this land in an area so urban like San Diego, where open space is disappearing. And so I also do this art also in that appreciation that somebody has put this land aside. So yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited. And if you decide after that that you are going to give any workshops, I'm in line already. I'm gonna be first.
All right, you are the first in line. There you go.
Okay.
You are the first in line.
And we'll make an announcement on the podcast too. So,
Sounds good.
all right. Well, I want to wrap up with two questions that we ask everyone who comes to the podcast. And
Mhm.
it's something that we are trying to explore, um, those two ideas about the joy of being an artist and a success for an artist, what it means to you. So, can you
Mm.
talk a little bit about that?
Oh, the joy of an artist. For me, the biggest joy is watching somebody fall in love with another piece of art. I I love that because then somehow my joy in that place, because mine are always about places, has somehow translated and ricocheted off to somebody else. Like somehow, like this piece is connecting us to that feeling in that place. And that probably to me is joy and success all at once. Because to me, that's what it's all about is how can I translate that awe that I feel in that place and have somebody else feel that in return. And it's very small and personal, and but that is huge, huge. It's huge for me. And yeah, I would say that is joy and success for me.
And you know what? Again, the more I talk to other artists, the more I see it's a pattern. A joy and success for true artists are the same. Very
Mm-hmm.
rarely anyone is talking about, financial success or the fame or something else. I mean, financial uh, success kind of comes to mind because it's something that is very common in the society. And when you are a full-time artist, unless you have, a huge support from your family, from your partner, you're an entrepreneur, you're running a small business. So that business success kind of comes along, and people have to figure it out. But the true success, pretty much every artist defines, like once they talk about joy, they don't talk about success because they just said what it is.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
yeah,
just I
yeah,
just told you. So yeah, it's very interesting.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very
It
interesting.
is.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're
Thank you
welcome.
so much for saying yes to this interview. And it was really educational and really inspiring. And yeah.
Thank you so much for asking me. This was a lot of fun. So
Oh, I
thank you
had
so
to.
much.
I had to.
Yeah.
Once I touched your piece, and I mean, I feel very privileged that
Oh,
that I had a firsthand access to your work.
yeah, it is. It's that thing of it's a very in-person thing, right? It doesn't translate as well
Absolutely.
to the digital medium, and yeah, and it's a thing of a three-dimensional work. So I am glad that you saw it, because then you asked me to come here. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will be having you again, and maybe in the future talk about your project that you're working on right now, and maybe about your workshops. I really, 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 really hope you're gonna do that.
You are first in line.
Okay. Okay, it's recorded.
Yes, yes, I'll
Okay.
record it.
All right. Thank you so much, Sue. Have a
Thank
great rest of
you.
your day.